You said about some of these other commodity markets, the base metals, the industrial commodities. You talk about you have a lot of supply destruction, which is obviously putting forces on prices, but you also fear that potentially we could be maybe entering a synchronous slowdown, which is going to taper demand. I'm wondering about the relative time constants or momentum, however you want to look at it. Because we can recover from an economic downturn fairly quickly.
We can.
Right? And that demand could come back. Supply is not going to come back quite as quickly. Doesn't that speak in favor of, even if we're in a slowdown, in favor of looking at these commodities?
Albert, it absolutely does. And I'm glad you slapped me around and brought me to my senses. The truth is that the longest unbroken bull market in history is the ascent of man. And it's important to note that these industrial commodities are the bedrock of material society. It's also really important to note that the most important part of commodity demand for the next 10 years is going to come from the poorest 2 billion people in the world. And I have witnessed over 30 years a really dramatic increase in the living standards of the poorest of the poor. One of the things that you do in my business is that you travel to frontier markets and look at deposits. And so I have had occasion to see poor people in many, many, many locales. And mercifully, they're becoming less poor. Desperately poor, to be sure. Why that's important is when you and I get more money, we don't buy much stuff. We already have too much stuff. Both of our lives would be improved by having less stuff. But if we were at the bottom of the demographic pyramid, if our purchasing power increased, we would buy things. We would improve the diet of our families. We would replace a thatch roof with a steel roof. We would upgrade, first of all, from walking, maybe shoeless, to having shoes, to having a bicycle, to having a 50cc motorcycle, to having a Hilux truck. And that's important. When the people at the bottom of the demographic pyramid get more money, which they are, they buy more stuff, and that translates into commodity demand. And as you point out, that change is continuous, and the relative change can be very rapid. When you destroy supply, by contrast, the permitting lead times, the financing lead times, just the construction lead times, mean that making meaningful supply additions in resource businesses can take a decade or more. So you can turn around demand in a year, but you can't turn around supply in less than a decade. So the time arbitrage that you're discussing is an absolutely key element in this whole thesis.